I refused to sign the birth certificate. The words came out of me like gravel dragged across concrete, heavy, jagged, impossible to swallow back down. The nurse froze, her pen midair, the clipboard hanging between us. My duffel bag sat slumped against the wall, still dusted in gray cement from the job site earlier that morning. My steel-toe boots squeaked against the tile floor as I shifted my weight. Every eye in that hospital room fixed on me. Rachel's wide with shock, the social workers narrowing like she'd just spotted a dangerous animal, the doctor whispering something I didn't catch. The smell of antiseptic cut through my chest, sharp and cold, while the newborn's tiny wail filled the room, fragile but piercing. I couldn't bring myself to look at the baby, not yet. Not when my gut told me the truth before any test could. My name's Jack Mercer. I'm 45 years old, and I've spent the last 2 decades pouring concrete under the Texas sun. Dallas has been my whole world. Job sites stretching across the city like a second home, hands cracked and scarred, but steady. The kind of steady that builds highways, bridges, foundations people never think twice about. I used to be proud of that, coming home each day smelling of sweat and dust, dropping my lunch pail by the door, knowing I'd earned every cent that kept the lights on. That life felt solid, unshakable, like the concrete I worked with. But looking at Rachel that night in the hospital, eyes darting away from mine, I realized even concrete can crack. I still remember the night we first met, back when things felt lighter, easier. It was a summer cookout in a buddy's backyard, the kind where the grill smoke clings to your clothes, and someone's uncle always brings too much Bud Light. Rachel stood near the folding table, plastic cup in hand, laughing at some joke I never heard. Her hair caught the porch light just right, and when she turned, I swear I felt like the whole crowd blurred away. I walked up, clumsy, introduced myself, and she smiled like she'd been waiting on me all night. That smile was the first hook, the one that reeled me into a story I never expected. We built our life piece by piece after that. Coffee at the old diner off Highway 67 where the waitress always called me Hon, even though Rachel rolled her eyes. Friday nights cheering at high school football games, even though neither of us had kids yet, just because it was something to do and Texas under the lights is a religion of its own. Garlic pasta dinners in our first little starter home, the ranch-style place with the peeling paint and the drafty windows, but more love than space. Sundays meant barbecue, me at the grill, her making potato salad, the two of us laughing at nothing. I kept the first Valentine's card she ever gave me, pressed flat in a shoebox under our bed. The ink smudged from my thumbs. On our wedding day, when I looked at her in that white dress with the Texas sun beating down, I believed in forever. The years rolled on with road trips, Polaroids taped to the fridge, the little rituals that make a marriage feel like a rhythm you never want to break. Rachel loved leaving sticky notes on the bathroom mirror. Good luck today. Don't forget milk. Can't wait to see you tonight. I kept every one of them, tucked in the glove box of my Ford F-150 like Lucky Charms. I thought we were the kind of couple people envied, the kind that made it through storms because we knew how to dance in the rain. But looking back, I can see where the hairline cracks started showing. It wasn't dramatic, not at first, just little things. She'd brush off questions with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. She started hanging out with Brittany more often, her wild friend, the one who always stirred trouble, the kind of woman who thrived on late nights and secrets. Rachel began talking about work more, about deadlines and projects that somehow always kept her later at the office. I'd sit at home with ESPN humming on the TV, a Bud Light sweating on the coffee table, wondering why her car wasn't in the driveway yet. There were looks too, quick glances she thought I didn't notice, checking her phone under the table, smiling at something that didn't involve me. Once I caught her reflection in the window, face lit up by a text, and it wasn't the smile she used to give me. It was sharper, hidden, like a secret she couldn't wait to dive back into. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Every marriage has rough patches. She was tired, stressed, maybe pulling more weight at the office. I convinced myself she needed space, and I gave it, because that's what you do when you trust somebody. You hand them your heart and believe they won't drop it. But that night in the hospital, when the nurse held out the form, everything I'd been ignoring slammed into me at once. Rachel's eyes didn't beg me to sign. They dared me, like she already knew the truth, like she'd already chosen to play me for a fool. My hand hovered over the paper, the pen heavier than rebar. The baby's tiny fist waved in the air, a sound that should have broken me open with love, but instead it carved me hollow. I thought back to the frame wedding photo on our mantle, her smile pressed against mine, both of us grinning like kids who believed the world belonged to us. I thought about the sticky notes, the Sunday barbecues, the road trips with the windows down, and her hair whipping across her face. All those memories lined up in my head like soldiers, standing at attention, daring me to believe they meant something. And yet, underneath it all, one thought drowned everything out. Forever might have an expiration date. I wish I could say I didn't see it coming, that betrayal hit me like lightning from a clear sky. But the truth? Deep down, I'd felt the storm brewing long before the first drop fell. I just refused to look up. I wanted to believe concrete doesn't crack. I wanted to believe Rachel still loved me the way she used to, when she held my hand at football games and kissed me across diner coffee mugs. But that night in the hospital, faced with a form that could chain me to a lie, I knew denial couldn't protect me anymore. "Mr. Mercer," the nurse's voice broke into my thoughts, soft but firm. "We need your signature." My jaw clenched. My breath came shallow. I stared at the blank line, then back at Rachel. Her lips curled into something between a plea and a smirk. I set the pen down. "I won't do it," I said, my voice steady, almost calm. "Not until I know the truth." The room went cold. The social worker scribbled something on her tablet. The doctor shifted uncomfortably. Rachel's face hardened, but her eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite name. Fear, anger, maybe both. Back then, I thought we were building forever. I didn't realize forever had an expiration date. Rachel's laugh used to be my favorite sound. Now, every time I heard it from another room, muffled and sharp, I wondered who she was really laughing with. After that night in the hospital, I didn't bring it up right away. I went back to work, poured my concrete, carried my lunch pail, and pretended I could muscle through life like always. But when I got home, the air in the house felt different. Her phone started living face down on the kitchen counter. "Girls' night," she'd say, grabbing her purse and heading out. "Work retreat," she muttered once, heels clicking down the driveway long past midnight. At first, I told myself not to spiral, but then little things stacked up. Brittany called the house one Saturday afternoon, her voice syrupy, asking if Rachel was coming over to get wild. When I asked Rachel later, she swore she was at a staff meeting. My gut twisted the way it does when rebar snaps under your boot. The first real crack came in the form of paper. A credit card statement slid out of the mailbox one Friday, the kind of envelope you don't expect to carry landmines. I tossed it on the kitchen table, opened a Bud Light, and started flipping through. Omni Hotel, Capitol Grill, dates that lined up with nights Rachel swore she was working late. I sat there staring at the print, my jaw tightening. Concrete doesn't lie, neither do receipts. That night, when she slipped her phone under the pillow before bed, I felt the distance between us like a canyon. I kissed her cheek anyway, told her goodnight, then lay awake listening to her breathing. My own chest felt like it was carrying a jackhammer. The next week, another clue. I was looking for quarters in her purse to grab a Dr. Pepper from the vending machine. Instead, I found a gas receipt from a Shell station 30 miles north. Same night she told me she was carpooling with coworkers to a team dinner downtown. I tucked it back exactly how I found it. My heart was steady, but my hands shook like I'd just carried wet concrete up 3 flights of stairs. It all might have stayed guesswork if not for her iPad. One night she left it on the couch, screen glowing. I sat down, and there it was, her iMessages syncing without her even realizing. Blue bubbles stacked with late-night jokes, emojis, "can't wait to see you again." My throat went dry. My thumb scrolled down further. Pictures, not explicit, but enough. Her hair mussed, his shoulder in the frame, the kind of intimacy you can't fake. I wanted to throw the iPad through the wall. Instead, I closed it softly, set it back on the couch, and poured myself whiskey over ice. From that moment, I started cataloging. Quiet, careful. Like pouring a foundation, you measure, you align, you make sure every inch is straight before you set it in stone. I bought a manila folder from Walmart, nothing fancy, and slid the credit card statements inside. Then the gas receipts. Then screenshots from her iPad messages, snapped on my phone while she was in the shower. Each piece of evidence stacked like rebar, reinforcing the case I was building in silence. I started watching her more closely, her makeup heavier on nights she claimed were just yoga with Brittany, her perfume hanging in the air hours after she left. Once she came home with a small bruise on her neck, tucked under her collar. She brushed past me before I could say a word, went straight into the bathroom, and locked the door. I sat on the couch, ESPN murmuring about the Cowboys' playoff chances. staring at the closed door while my Bud Light went flat. The cruelest part? She acted sweeter in between the lies. Pancakes in the morning, sticky notes on the mirror again, little gestures that almost made me forget what I'd seen. Almost. But when she kissed me goodnight, I tasted the ghost of someone else on her lips. One night, after she left for another so-called work retreat, I couldn't hold back. I drove past the Omni Hotel, that same address I'd seen on the statement. Her Ford Escape was parked out front, tucked into the corner like it didn't want to be seen. I didn't go inside. Didn't need to. My headlights reflected off the hood, and my stomach dropped. Proof doesn't always need words. A week later, while digging through the junk drawer for batteries, I found something that froze my blood. A sealed day test kit, shoved under old receipts and takeout menus. I turned the box over in my hands, the kind of silence around me that buzzed louder than any job site drill. She'd thought about testing, or maybe she already had. My reflection in the microwave glass looked like a stranger's face. I set the box back exactly how I found it. After that, I became an investigator in my own home. Every late arrival got logged. Every unexplained receipt got scanned into my phone. I created a hidden folder labeled simply Work Docs, but inside was my growing archive. My tone shifted, even when I spoke to her. Steady, cool, almost mechanical. Rachel would complain that I was distant, that I didn't hold her the way I used to. I nodded, smiled, kissed her forehead, and filed her words away like evidence. It wasn't just me noticing either. One of my buddies from the job site pulled me aside after work. "Jack," he said, scratching at the concrete dust on his arm, "I saw Rachel at Capitol Grill last week. She wasn't with Brittany." My chest hollowed out, but I played it off, said thanks, and went back to work. Every nail in the coffin didn't need to be hammered in front of him. The days turned gray, each one a balancing act between pretending and knowing. I'd sit at the diner with bacon and coffee, flipping through the paper, and catch myself tracing her smile in old photos on my phone. Then I'd remember the iMessages, the receipts, the DNA kit, and my hand would clench until the ceramic mug cracked against my palm. The real breaking point came on a Tuesday night. Rachel texted me at 7:12 p.m. Running late, big project at the office. I stared at the screen, nodded to myself, then pulled out the folder, flipped to the Omni Hotel receipt dated the same Tuesday. Timestamp, 7:12 p.m. The exact minute she'd sent me the message. My vision tunneled. The beer in my hand tasted like ash. That's when it stopped being suspicion. That's when it became proof. I closed the folder, set it on the table beside my wedding photo, and leaned back in the chair. My jaw was tight, breath shallow, but my voice came steady in the empty room. "She's not coming back to me. She's already gone." The house hummed with silence. Outside, the cicadas droned in the Texas heat. Inside, the walls felt closer than ever, as if they knew what I was about to do next. I didn't know how or when yet, but I knew this. The truth had a timestamp now, and soon it was going to explode. The folder sat heavy in my truck like a live bomb. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, gas slips, screenshots of iMessages, even the DNA kit box I'd photographed. It all stacked inside, proof carved into paper and pixels. I drove with the windows down, Dallas heat rushing through, ESPN murmuring on the radio, and one thought circling my mind. If I didn't confront her soon, the lie would calcify, and I'd be buried alive under it. I picked the setting carefully, not the house. Too private, too easy for her to spin the story in her favor. Not at Brittany's either. I wasn't about to step foot into that circus. I needed a place where lies couldn't hide, where witnesses would hear every word. The decision hit me one night as I flipped through that folder at the kitchen table, Bud Light sweating in my hand. The hospital, the same place where I'd refused to sign that certificate, the place where truth had first cracked the walls. It was poetic, it was brutal, and it was public enough that she couldn't wriggle free. Rachel didn't expect me to show up. She was scheduled for a postpartum checkup, and I told her I had work. But I was waiting in the lobby, folder under my arm, when she walked through those sliding glass doors. She froze for a second, her eyes darting to the brown envelope I carried. Then she smoothed her hair, plastered on a smile, and tried to glide past me. "Jack," she said, soft but sharp, "what are you doing here?" "Making sure the truth finally gets its turn," I replied, my voice calm, jaw tight. A nurse at the desk looked up. Two patients in the waiting room turned their heads. Rachel flushed, her fingers tightening around her purse strap. We were called back together, the doctor cheerful, oblivious. "How are we both doing?" she asked. Rachel launched into a rehearsed monologue about recovery, diet, the baby's sleep schedule. I let her finish, then set the folder on the counter with a thud that silenced the room. "Doctor," I said evenly, "before we move forward, I think you should see this." The nurse leaned in. The doctor frowned. Rachel's face went pale. I opened the folder, spreading receipts like poker cards across the counter. Omni Hotel, Capitol Grill, Shell Station, time-stamped text messages that matched every lie. Rachel hissed under her breath, "You're being dramatic." I turned, locked eyes with her. "You said you haven't loved me in years. There's no way to mean that lightly." The nurse gasped, covering her mouth. The doctor cleared her throat, fumbling for professionalism, but the silence in the room felt like a courtroom before a verdict. Rachel tried to laugh, a brittle sound. "You're twisting things, Jack. These are just business dinners, work retreats." "Business retreats don't leave bruises on your neck," I cut in, steady, the words slicing through her excuse. I slid the photo across the counter, the one I had snapped from her iPad, her hair mussed, another man's shoulder in the frame. The nurse looked away. The doctor, awkward and stiff, muttered, "Perhaps this isn't the best place." "No," I said, my voice low but firm. "This is exactly the right place. Truth doesn't need a better room." Rachel's mask cracked then, her face twisted, eyes flashing anger. "You've been spying on me? You've invaded my privacy?" I leaned closer, calm, unshakable. "I wasn't spying, I was surviving. There's a difference." Her voice rose, pitched high, shaking. "You're humiliating me in front of strangers." "That's because you humiliated me in front of the world," I shot back. "Every hotel clerk, every waiter at Capitol Grill, every text that left your phone. You wrote the humiliation, Rachel. I'm just reading it out loud." The nurse whispered something to the doctor, who nodded grimly. The air in the room tightened, the way it does before lightning splits the sky. Rachel's eyes darted around, looking for an exit, but there was none. Then came the moment I'd prepared for. I reached into the folder one last time and pulled out the sealed DNA test result envelope. I'd done it behind her back, sending swabs to the lab the moment I found that kit in the junk drawer. The envelope was heavy, almost theatrical in my hand. I laid it flat on the counter. "Doctor, would you mind reading this aloud, since this is a place of truth and healing?" Rachel lunged for the envelope, but the nurse snatched it first, eyes wide. With hesitant fingers, she tore it open, scanning the page. The silence stretched. Finally, her voice trembled. "Paternity result. 0% probability of relatedness." The room froze. The doctor's pen slipped from her hand. The nurse's lips parted in shock. Rachel's knees buckled, and she clutched the counter like it might save her. The world narrowed to that single number. 0%. Every sticky note, every Sunday barbecue, every late night I'd sat waiting on the couch, shattered in a line of clinical print. Rachel tried to recover, voice breaking. "Jack, it's not what you think. I was confused. I held up a hand, silencing her. "No more lies, no more confusion. You made your choices, Rachel, and this," I tapped the paper, "is the only clarity I'll ever need." Her face contorted, a mix of rage and desperation. She screamed, the sound echoing down the sterile hallway. A mother with a newborn peeked her head out of a nearby exam room, eyes wide. A man in the waiting room muttered, "Damn," pulling out his phone, recording. Rachel reached for me, as if grabbing my shirt could undo it all. I stepped back, cool as stone. "Don't touch me." The nurse whispered, "Do you want security?" I shook my head. No. The truth's already cuffed her tighter than any guard could. Rachel's sobs filled the room. The doctor stood frozen, unsure whether to console or stay silent. I gathered the folder, slid the papers back inside with methodical precision, and tucked it under my arm. As I walked past Rachel, she screamed after me, words jagged and raw. "You'll regret this. You'll see what happens when you ruin me." I didn't stop, didn't flinch. The waiting room was dead silent except for the recording phone, and Rachel's sobs bleeding through the hallway. I pushed open the hospital doors, sunlight blinding, heat slamming against me. Outside, I exhaled, slow and steady, and pulled the whiskey flask from my jacket. I took a long sip, the burn chasing down my throat like justice served neat. Behind me, the automatic doors hissed shut, cutting off her voice for good. The morning after the hospital confrontation, the house felt like a stranger's place. The wedding photo on the mantel looked staged, a lie preserved in glass. I sat at the kitchen table, folder spread before me like a battlefield report, Receipts, screenshots, DNA results. The truth was no longer a suspicion, no longer whispers in my head. It was ink on paper, stamped with 0% certainty. There was nothing left to debate. I didn't scream, didn't throw things. Instead, I poured myself diner-style coffee into a chipped mug and called my lawyer. His office smelled like leather and paper when I walked in, folder tucked under my arm. He flipped through each page, whistling low. "Jack, you've got her cold. Paternity fraud, adultery, financial misconduct. It's all right here. We'll file for divorce immediately." The divorce papers came quicker than I expected, as if the law itself was impatient to free me. Rachel tried to fight, of course. Her lawyer argued I'd abandoned her, that I was heartless, that I knew what I was signing up for when I married her. But the DNA results spoke louder than any courtroom theatrics. The judge glanced at the paper, adjusted his glasses, and shook his head. "Mr. Mercer is not the father. Custody, financial responsibility, and property divisions will reflect this fact." Rachel's jaw dropped. She pleaded, tears streaking down her face. "But the house, Your Honor, we built it together." The gavel struck. "The house remains with Mr. Mercer. Court adjourned." It was over. Just like that. No drawn-out trial, no long speeches. Just the clean cut of a blade separating my life into before and after. Walking out of the courthouse, folder in one hand, divorce decree in the other, I felt lighter than I had in months. The Dallas sun hit my face, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't burn, it warmed. I slid into my Ford F-150, turned the key, and let the rumble of the engine drown out everything else. The days that followed weren't glamorous. Healing never is. I ate a lot of pancakes, more than I should admit, at the diner down the street. The waitress, an older woman named Donna, always poured my coffee heavy and asked, "Rough week, hun?" I'd nod, tear into bacon, and find some kind of comfort in the smell of grease and maple syrup. One evening, my niece came over, crayons scattered across the kitchen table. She drew a picture of me, her, and a dog we didn't even own, under a bright yellow sun. At the top, in crooked letters, she wrote, "My forever team." I taped it to the fridge. That piece of construction paper meant more than any photograph Rachel had ever staged. My brother stopped by too. We sat on the porch with Bud Light sweating in our hands, the Texas night thick with cicadas. He clinked his can against mine. "Hell of a storm you went through, Jack." "Yeah," I said, staring at the dark street, "but storms clear the air." He nodded, and sometimes they wash the trash out to the curb. I laughed for the first time in weeks, not bitter, not forced, real. Rachel, meanwhile, spiraled. Word spread fast. Dallas isn't as big as it thinks it is. The video from the hospital had gone viral, some kid shouting, "World Star," in the background, while Rachel's scream echoed down the hallway. Neighbors whispered. Her job pulled her off client accounts. Even Brittany stopped answering her calls. Reputation is a fragile thing, and hers crumbled like drywall in a flood. I didn't gloat, didn't chase updates. I had no appetite for revenge anymore. Watching her fall wasn't satisfying. It was sad, like seeing a house you once built reduced to rubble. But rubble can't be rebuilt, not the same way, and I was done living inside ruins. Instead, I poured myself into smaller joys. Saturday mornings meant bacon sizzling, football reruns on ESPN, and the quiet hum of my truck engine when I drove nowhere in particular. I started jogging again, something I hadn't done since my 20s, feeling my lungs burn in a good way. I even joined a men's group at the local church, not because I suddenly found religion, but because it felt good to sit in a circle and tell the truth without fear of it being twisted. One night, sitting alone on the porch with a beer, I thought about love, how it begins soft, backyard cookouts, diner coffee, garlic pasta dinners, how it hardens like concrete, each year layering on top of the last, until you think it's indestructible. But even concrete cracks when water seeps in and freezes. I realized Rachel's affair didn't break me. It just revealed where the cracks already were. Peace isn't flashy. It doesn't come with applause or viral videos. It comes quietly, like the first cool breeze after a long Texas summer. It comes when you wake up and realize you're not bracing for another lie. It comes when you pour syrup on pancakes and taste sweetness instead of ash. I don't hate Rachel. I don't wish her harm. But I don't miss her either. The woman I loved existed once. Maybe still does in some parallel timeline where she chose honesty instead of deceit. But that's not my timeline. My timeline is here, with with coffee mugs, crayon drawings, and a truck that still starts every morning. People ask me if I regret staying as long as I did, if I regret ignoring the signs. The truth is, love makes fools of us all, and I'd rather be a fool for loving too much than a cynic who never tried. But if there's one lesson I carry, it's this. You don't always leave because you stopped loving them. Sometimes you leave because you finally love yourself enough not to stay. The night I signed the divorce papers, I sat alone at the kitchen table. No folder, no receipts, no evidence. Just me and a clean sheet of paper that said, in black ink, that it was over. I slid the pen across the line, steady hand, no hesitation. Outside, a neighbor's kid laughed, chasing fireflies. ESPN buzzed softly on the TV. The house creaked in the Texas heat. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without choking. I raised my Bud Light in the air, to no one in particular, and whispered, "Here's to peace." Sometimes the trash takes itself out.